Hello everyone, it's the Lone Biker here, John McCracken, and today you join me on a non-cycling day as I investigate the mystery of the creak. Now, if you're like me and most cyclists will have experienced this, you get that moment with your bike where there is a creak coming from somewhere and it is the most annoying thing. And no matter what you do, you just can't pinpoint it. You can be out on the bike and sometimes you think it's coming from the back, sometimes you think it's coming from the front, sometimes you think it's coming from the middle, sometimes you think it's coming from below. And no matter what you do, you just cannot pinpoint that creak. And in fact, people look at you strangely out on your bike when you're out the saddle and you're listening into things and trying to steer and not crash at the same time. So I'm going to run through a few of the places to check first, and maybe a few surprising places, maybe to find that creak and how we can fix it. Hopefully. So the number one place for the source of a creak would be in here, the bottom bracket. Now I would say a good 80% of the time that I've got a creak in my bike, it's because I've worn out the bottom bracket. And you can usually tell because there's usually a wee bit of play when you move your crankset as well. And it probably, if it's a bottom bracket, it'll be making it all the time, if not when under stress, and both when you are in the saddle and out of the saddle. Now, I would advise doing as I do, so you don't have to wait in bottom brackets. If you see a deal in bottom brackets, get a couple, right? Especially if it's on your winter bike. The winter is the hardest on your bottom brackets just because the ingress of water and mud, especially in your gravel bike, you really want to have them. And if you're doing a lot of miles in the winter, gravel or road, don't be surprised that your bottom bracket only lasts for that season, because that's how I find it. So if you see a deal on some bottom brackets, go for them. Some people like to pay a wee bit more for the ceramic bottom brackets. Certainly they might last a bit longer and are more serviceable, so you can only replace the bearings instead of the whole bottom bracket. But I know that cost can be cost can be a barrier for a few folks. So again, store some bottom brackets and don't be surprised if that's where the noise is coming from. This might be one of the most valuable tools to own if you're doing any home mechanics. This is your torque wrench. And most of your bike parts will tell you what torque settings they should be done up to. This is especially important when dealing with carbon stuff, because over tighten it and you're basically going to crumble your frame. And the torque wrench or a set of Allen keys, they're going to be your friend in finding and fixing a lot of the creaks in your bicycle. So this bike is my good summer road bike, and because it's only out in the summer, it hadn't had a service for a while because I hadn't needed it, but I was getting multiple creaks from it, and I realised after the service I was still getting a creak, but it was quite easily to work out because it was only coming when I was out of the saddle, in the saddle and going over rougher roads. Now, see the rails where they attach into the seat posts? Over time, the plastic will widen just enough that these metal rails will start to just move inside, and if it's the weight of your whole body on it, that's going to creak and be annoying. Also, this can creak if this bolt isn't tight enough. Now, these tighten up a lot tighter than you would think. This is 10 newtons is the force to get through that. So quite often I get a creak in the saddle and it was this bolt that needed tidying up, but I used my torque wrench just to make sure I was doing it up right. So make sure you're saddle, and I think I've solved my creaking problem. The other thing that can do it is a seat post. Now, if you've got a carbon seat post like mine, I've just taken my carbon seat post out. It's good to take your seat post out every now and then anyway, especially if it's having a service. But I've put some carbon paste in there, which stops it being too dry. And obviously you don't put grease in there or else you're going to be sliding downhill all the time. But the carbon paste stops this from sticking. But if there's any wee loosen at all, then that'll help keep it in place. And also, make sure you've taut this up to the correct force. These things will loosen over time, and it is wise just to give them a once-over every now and then. Now next, you'll not be surprised to know, and maybe you will be surprised to know, how a chain can cause a huge amount of creak. And depending on the miles you do, you can wear your chain out quite quickly. And obviously it's going to start creaking if it's too big for what it's enlarged to too much of a bigger size for what it's meant to go around. The chain, the creak I was getting in the saddle has went away with a brand new chain. Just be careful as well. If you're needing a new chain, it's good to have your cassette checked as well, because that can also creak, and also if you've worn your chain, you can actually have worn your cassette. Now, the hub in here as well over time can start to wear, and that can cause a bit of creak, so that can be a solution. And maybe just tighten up your cogs as well. And obviously I've got really good wheels, but I've found whenever I've had stock wheels, they wear out quickly, and again, creak from the rear hub is something that can cause that annoying sound. The other thing you can get is pedals. The wee bearings in here can wear out over time. Now, these actually can be replaced and serviced, or you maybe need a new pedal. And again, the way to test it is if you get play up and down here, then you'll know your pedal is worn. So that's another place that you could get a creak from. And again, it's all about standing up, out and in and out the saddle and checking all these things. One thing your bike shop will do for you, and you can maybe do yourself, is check the torque settings for these bolts. Over times, the bolts in your crankset can maybe loosen off, and that can cause a bit of creak if you're putting a bit of force through the pedals. So that's another thing you should look out for. Headsets, these can cause a bit of creak, so always make sure you've taut these up properly, never too tight but not too loose either. And again, torque up these bolts as well. You're putting a lot of pressure through these with your hands and your upper body weight. And then the headset bearings in here, they can creak. The bottom bearing in here was completely worn, and even though this bike barely ever comes out in the wet, there was water ingress in there. I mean, if you live in the UK like I do, water gets everywhere. But yes, headset bearings in there definitely need checked. Again, one way you can test is stand out the saddle, and if you're still getting the creak, it could be coming from in here because you're putting more weight in the handlebars and the front end of the bike if you are out the saddle. Now, finding the creak in your own, bike shops are really good at finding all these things, and sometimes just a service is enough to get rid of the creaks, because they are going through your bike and checking every single one of these parts that I've mentioned. Now, this bike had a creak for ages. Changed the bottom bracket, changed the wheels, checked all the things I was checking, brand new chain, and eventually I took it into the bike shop and said, look, listen, I don't want this bike back until it stops making that noise. Now, in the end, they just charged me for a gold service because they said they took the bike to bits and rebuilt it twice and eventually found it was the cups in here that were slightly loose in the headset, and that's what was causing it. And I've never been so relieved. So there's a quick rundown of the various things that can cause creak in your bike, and I know that is one of the most annoying things as a cyclist, because when you go on your bike you just hear it all the time. It's a repetitive noise that's annoying. Sometimes it even goes so bad You might even stick the earphones in or something just so you don't hear it. It's a bit like that old adage about if there's something wrong with your car, just turn the radio up and then you can't hear it anymore. But we all know our bikes are a labour of love and we don't want them to creak. The only thing I would suggest is if you're 46 like me, just make sure the creak isn't coming for your knees. Now that was a wee brief rundown of the creak today, and I hope you don't find yourself up the creek without a paddle, but if you do, bike shop, they'll always fix it, and my local bike shop's cycle station are great for fixing the creaks on my bike, and PhysioFlex, my physiotherapist, are great for fixing the creaks in the knees. Anyway, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, just get out and ride. Cheers!